The sentence that changed everything. The year was 2367, and humanity had spread across the stars, forming colonies and alliances with alien species. Earth, now a core member of the Intergalactic Accord, thrived as a hub for diplomacy and trade. Among the allied species were the Norians, a proud and aristocratic race with an affinity for order and tradition. Their crystalline cities sparkled under twin suns, and their rigid laws reflected centuries of control and hierarchy. Kara, a Norian princess, was no stranger to the expectations of her role. Raised in the pristine capital of Illuminar, she had been groomed for diplomacy and leadership. Yet, deep within her heart, a rebellious spark burned. While her peers focused on mastering etiquette and protocol, Kara yearned for something more, a life beyond the gilded walls of her station. Her curiosity led her down a dangerous path. Against her people's strict isolationist policies, Kara began secretly studying humanity, a species the Norians viewed as primitive and chaotic. Through encrypted transmissions, she learned about their resilience, creativity, and diversity. But when her secret activities were discovered, she faced the full weight of Norian law. The Council of Elders convened in their grand chamber, its walls shimmering with shifting colors of light. Kara stood before them, her head held high despite the fear coursing through her veins. Kara of House Talon, the head elder announced, his voice resonating like a chime in the vast hall. You have defied our laws and tarnished the honor of your lineage. For consorting with the ways of lesser beings, you are sentenced to servitude. You will be exiled to a human colony and placed under the custody of one of their own. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Exile was rare, but servitude to a human? It was unthinkable. Kara's heart clenched, but she refused to beg for mercy. If she was to be punished for her curiosity, so be it. Let this serve as a lesson to all who would stray from our ways, the elder continued. May you find humility and redemption among the species you so admire. The journey to the human colony was a blur. Stripped of her status and her psionic abilities suppressed by a control band, Kara felt powerless and humiliated. The sleek Norian transport left her in a small settlement on the edge of a barren world called Novaterra, far from the bustling trade hub she had studied. Her owner, as dictated by the council, was a human named Daniel Hayes. A former engineer turned farmer, Daniel lived a quiet life tending to crops and repairing machinery. When the authorities informed him he'd been assigned a Norian asset, he was baffled and uneasy. The idea of owning anyone, let alone an alien, went against everything he believed. When the transport landed in his dusty yard, Daniel stood frozen. Kara emerged gracefully, her silver hair gleaming in the sunlight despite the crude collar around her neck. Her eyes, a vivid shade of teal, scanned the surroundings with a mix of disdain and curiosity. I am Kara of House Talon, she said, her voice steady despite her circumstances. I have been sent to serve you. Daniel frowned, his discomfort evident. Serve me? Look, I don't know what kind of arrangement this is, but I'm not keeping you as a servant. Kara raised an eyebrow, her pride prickling at his casual tone. It is not your choice, human. I am bound to you by Norian decree. Well, Norian decree doesn't mean much to me, Daniel shot back, scratching the back of his neck. You're free to leave if you want. Kara's expression faltered. I cannot. The council has ensured my containment. Daniel sighed, his frustration softening into resignation. Fine. If you're stuck here, we'll figure something out. But I'm not treating you like a slave. You're a guest, okay? Kara tilted her head, studying him. His words were strange, almost naive, but she detected no malice. Very well, she said cautiously. I will stay. For now. Over the following days, Kara observed Daniel's simple yet efficient life. He rose early to tend to his crops, fixed the colony's aging equipment, and welcomed visitors with an easy smile. His resilience and ingenuity intrigued her, even as she struggled to adapt to the rough, unrefined world she found herself in. Daniel, in turn, found himself captivated by Kara's sharp wit and unyielding determination. Though she carried an air of superiority, there was a vulnerability beneath her stoic facade, a longing for something she couldn't quite name. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the twin moons rise, Kara broke the silence. "Why do you care so much about what happens to me?" Daniel shrugged, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I guess it's just the way we humans are. We look out for each other, even when it's not easy." Kara's gaze lingered on him, her heart stirring with emotions she didn't fully understand. Perhaps exile wasn't the end of her story but the beginning of something unexpected, a chance to see the humanity she had admired up close and to discover what lay beyond the confines of her old life. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in her life, Kara felt a spark of hope. A fragile alliance. The days following Kara's arrival were marked by an uneasy truce. Kara, though prideful and often aloof, began to adapt to her new surroundings, if only to make her captivity more bearable. Daniel, meanwhile, did his best to make her feel welcome, though her sharp tongue and icy demeanor made it a challenge. Kara quickly realized that life on Novaterra was nothing like the structured and pristine existence she had known on Noria. The farm was simple, almost primitive by her standards, with manual labor and basic tools replacing the advanced technology she once relied upon. The air smelled of earth and greenery, a stark contrast to the sterile, perfumed halls of her homeworld. One morning, as the sun rose over the jagged hills, Daniel knocked gently on the door of the small guest room he'd offered her. "Hey, Kara," he called. "Breakfast is ready. Figured you might want to eat before we get started on the repairs." Kara opened the door, her expression guarded. "Repairs? I am not one of your workers." Daniel leaned against the doorframe, his easygoing smile disarming. "You're not a worker, but you're not a prisoner either. Thought you might want to learn something useful while you're here. Or you can sit around and stare at the walls. Your choice." Her pride bristled at his tone, but curiosity won out. "Fine," she said, brushing past him. "Show me this primitive work of yours." The task of the day involved repairing a broken irrigation system that watered the farm's crops. Kara observed as Daniel crouched beside a tangle of pipes, tools scattered around him. He explained the mechanics in simple terms, but she quickly deduced the logic on her own. It was fascinating in its own way, this hands-on approach to problem-solving, so different from the effortless automation of Noria. "Here, hold this," Daniel said, handing her a rusted wrench. Kara took it hesitantly, her delicate fingers curling around the unfamiliar tool. "This is absurd," she muttered, though she crouched beside him to assist. "Yeah, maybe," Daniel replied, smirking. "But it works. And when you're done, you'll feel like you've actually accomplished something." To her surprise, he was right. By the time they finished, the irrigation system was back in working order, and the sight of water flowing smoothly through the pipes filled her with an unexpected sense of satisfaction. "This is not entirely unenjoyable," she admitted reluctantly, wiping her hands on a cloth he offered. Daniel laughed. "High praise from you, princess." Kara shot him a withering glare, though there was no real venom in it. "Do not call me that." All right, he said, raising his hands in mock surrender. "Kara, it is." Over time, a tentative rhythm developed between them. Kara began to help with the daily tasks around the farm, though she refused to admit she was enjoying herself. She found the simplicity of the work oddly therapeutic, a welcome distraction from the turmoil of her thoughts. Daniel, for his part, admired her intelligence and adaptability. Though she could be haughty and difficult, he saw glimpses of someone who was deeply curious and even compassionate beneath her guarded exterior. They often engaged in spirited debates, their clashing perspectives illuminating the vast differences and surprising similarities between their worlds. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat on the porch as they often did, watching the stars. Kara cradled a mug of herbal tea, a habit she had picked up from Daniel, though she would never admit to liking it. "Tell me," she said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. "Why did you choose this life? You seem capable of much more than this." Daniel tilted his head, considering her question. "I used to work in the colonies," he said. "Engineering, mostly. I liked it, but after a while, I realized I wanted something different. Something quieter. The farm gives me space to think, to work with my hands. It's not glamorous, but it's honest." Kara frowned, her gaze fixed on the horizon. It seems lonely. He glanced at her, a hint of sadness in his eyes. Sometimes. But it's better than the noise and chaos of the colonies. Out here, I can be myself. Kara nodded slowly, understanding more than she cared to admit. On Noria, she had been surrounded by people yet had often felt isolated, her every move scrutinized and judged. Here, on this quiet farm, she had begun to feel something she hadn't experienced in a long time: freedom. As the days turned into weeks, the fragile alliance between Kara and Daniel deepened into something resembling friendship. They worked side by side, argued over trivial matters, and shared stories of their vastly different worlds. Kara found herself laughing more often, a sound she barely recognized as her own. But even as she grew closer to Daniel, the control collar around her neck remained a constant reminder of her captivity. Her Norian pride demanded she find a way to break free, yet a small part of her hesitated. What would freedom mean now? Where would she go? And why did the thought of leaving this strange, kind human fill her with such unease? One night, as she lay in the small room Daniel had given her, Kara stared up at the ceiling, her mind racing. Her exile had been meant to punish her, to break her spirit. Instead, it had opened her eyes to a world she had never imagined. For the first time, she wondered if her punishment might be the beginning of something far greater than she had ever dared to dream. 4-0. A test of trust. Weeks turned into months, and Kara's life on the farm began to settle into a strange routine. She worked alongside Daniel, learning more about the tools and systems that kept the farm running. Though she would never admit it, she found herself respecting his resourcefulness and his ability to make do with so little. His stubborn optimism was both infuriating and strangely endearing. But beneath the surface, Kara's mind was always working. She couldn't ignore the control band around her neck, a constant reminder of the power the Norian Council still held over her. Though Daniel treated her as an equal, her Norian pride refused to accept the idea of servitude, even in its most benevolent form. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Kara stood in the barn, studying a collection of tools Daniel had left scattered on a workbench. Among them was a rudimentary scanner, a relic from the colony's early days. She picked it up, her fingers tracing its worn edges. "What are you doing?" Daniel's voice startled her, and she turned to see him standing in the doorway, arms crossed. His expression was curious rather than accusatory. "This device," Kara said, holding up the scanner. "It could be modified to emit a low-frequency pulse. If I can tune it correctly, it might disrupt the control band." Daniel stepped closer, his brow furrowed. "You're trying to remove the collar?" Kara nodded. "It's a crude method, but it might work." For a moment, Daniel said nothing. Then he sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "Kara, I get it. I can't imagine what it's like for you, having that thing around your neck. But if you mess this up, it could hurt you, or worse." "I know the risks," she said, her voice firm. "But I cannot remain like this forever. I need to reclaim some part of myself." Daniel studied her for a long moment before nodding. "All right. Let's do it together." Kara blinked, caught off guard. "You're willing to help me?" "Of course," he said, picking up a toolbox. "I may not agree with everything you've done, but no one deserves to be trapped like that. Besides, you've got a better chance with me around to keep things from blowing up." Despite herself, Kara felt a flicker of gratitude. She handed him the scanner and watched as he began dismantling it with practiced ease. The following days were a whirlwind of experimentation. Kara and Daniel worked together, piecing together components from various broken machines and discarded technology. Daniel showed her how to solder wires and read circuit diagrams, while Kara applied her knowledge of Norian energy patterns to refine their designs. The process wasn't without its frustrations. Kara's perfectionism clashed with Daniel's more improvisational approach, and their arguments often echoed through the barn. "You can't just patch it like that," Kara snapped one afternoon as Daniel attempted to jury-rig a capacitor into their makeshift device. Daniel shot her a look. "We don't exactly have Norian-grade tech lying around, princess. This is how humans get things done." Kara bristled at the nickname but bit back a retort. Deep down, she knew he was right. Their methods might be crude, but they were effective. Finally, after countless late nights and near disasters, the device was ready. It was small and unassuming, a patchwork of wires and metal plates, but it emitted the frequency they needed, or so they hoped. "Are you sure about this?" Daniel asked as they stood in the barn, the device humming softly on the workbench. Kara took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. "I have to be." Daniel nodded and positioned the device near her neck. "All right. On 3. 1, 2. Before he could finish, Kara activated the device herself. A sharp jolt of energy surged through her, and she cried out, stumbling back. Daniel caught her before she hit the ground, his eyes wide with concern. "Kara! Are you okay?" She clutched at her neck, her breathing ragged. For a moment, she thought the attempt had failed. But then she felt it. The oppressive weight of the control band lifting, her mind clearing as her suppressed psionic abilities returned. "I'm free," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of relief and disbelief. Daniel grinned. "We did it." Kara looked at him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Thank you, Daniel. I could not have done this without you." He shrugged, his smile softening. "That's what friends are for." As Kara adjusted to her newfound freedom, she began using her restored abilities to help around the farm. Her telekinesis made heavy lifting a breeze, and her enhanced senses allowed her to detect problems with crops and machinery before they became serious. But with her powers came a new dilemma. For the first time since her exile, she had the means to contact the Norien Council. She could demand her release, plead her case, or even seek revenge. The possibilities were endless, yet she found herself hesitating. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the stars, Daniel broke the silence. "So, what now?" Kara didn't answer immediately. She stared at the sky, her thoughts a tangled web of conflicting desires. Finally, she said, "I don't know. I thought I would want to leave the moment I regained my powers. But now..." She glanced at him, her expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. "There is something here, something I never expected to find. It makes the idea of leaving difficult." Daniel met her gaze, his eyes warm. "You've changed, Kara. And not just because you got your powers back. You're not the same person who stepped off that ship months ago." Kara looked away, her heart heavy. She had always believed that freedom meant returning to Noria, reclaiming her place among her people. But now she wasn't so sure. For the first time, she wondered if freedom might mean something else entirely, a choice, not a destination. As the stars twinkled above them, Kara realized that her journey was far from over. And whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone. 4-0. The call of the past. The weeks after Kara's liberation were a strange mixture of progress and uncertainty. With her powers restored, the once insurmountable tasks of farm life became effortless. She could lift heavy equipment with a flick of her hand, mend broken machinery with precision, and even create barriers to protect crops from harsh weather. Her presence turned the farm into something remarkable, a blend of human ingenuity and Norien refinement. But the freedom she had craved came with an unexpected weight. Each time she reached out with her abilities, she felt the distant pull of her people, a whisper in her mind, a thread connecting her to the Norien psionic network. They didn't speak to her directly, but their presence was there, constant and watchful. Kara knew that her use of her powers had not gone unnoticed. The council was aware of her defiance, and it was only a matter of time before they acted. One evening, as she and Daniel shared a quiet meal on the porch, the stillness was broken by the soft hum of an approaching ship. Kara froze, her senses immediately alert. The sound was unmistakable, a Norien craft descending from the atmosphere. Daniel set down his fork, his brow furrowed. "Kara, what's going on?" She stood, her expression tense. "They've come for me." The ship landed in the open field beyond the farmhouse, its sleek, crystalline structure gleaming under the moonlight. Kara and Daniel approached cautiously, the air between them thick with unspoken tension. The craft's ramp lowered, and 3 Noryan figures emerged, their robes shimmering like liquid silver. The lead figure, an elder with sharp features and piercing eyes, stepped forward. His gaze settled on Kara, a mixture of disappointment and curiosity evident in his expression. "Kara of House Talon," he said, his voice resonating like a bell. "You have defied the will of the council. We gave you an opportunity for redemption, and yet you choose rebellion." Kara met his gaze, her voice steady. "You did not give me redemption. You gave me chains. And in those chains, I found strength." The elder's eyes narrowed. "You speak of strength, yet you cling to this primitive existence. You abandon your heritage for the sake of, what? This human?" Kara glanced at Daniel, who stood silently beside her, his jaw tight. "This human," she said, her voice rising, "has shown me more kindness and wisdom than our people ever did. You call him primitive, but he possesses a strength of spirit that our society has long forgotten." The elder's expression hardened. "Your defiance has blinded you. Return to Noria with us now, and the council may yet show mercy." Kara took a step forward, her posture defiant. "I will not return under your terms. If I return, it will be as an equal, not a penitent. And I will not abandon what I have built here." The tension in the air crackled as the other Norians shifted uncomfortably. The elder raised a hand, his voice sharp. "You leave us no choice." Before Kara could respond, a low, steady voice broke through the tension. "You do have a choice," Daniel said, stepping forward. His calm demeanor belied the storm of emotions behind his words. "Kara doesn't belong to you, and she's not the same person you sent here. If you truly want to see her grow, you'll listen to what she has to say." The elder turned his gaze to Daniel, his expression unreadable. "And what could a human possibly teach us?" Daniel met his gaze without flinching. "A lot, if you're willing to learn." The elder considered Daniel's words, his silence heavy with thought. Finally, he spoke. "Very well. Kara, you will return to Noria not as a prisoner, but as a representative. You claim to have found strength here, to have learned truths we have forgotten. If that is so, the council will hear you." Kara's breath caught. She had not expected this. "And Daniel?" she asked. The elder's gaze flicked to Daniel, his expression disdainful. "He is irrelevant." "No," Kara said firmly. "If I return, he comes with me. He is as much a part of my story as I am." The elder's lips tightened, but he gave a reluctant nod. "Very well. Prepare yourselves. We leave at dawn." That night, Kara and Daniel sat together under the stars, the weight of the coming journey pressing down on them. "You didn't have to do that," Kara said softly. "You could have let me go." Daniel looked at her, his eyes steady. "I wasn't about to let you face them alone. Besides, I think they need to see what humans are really capable of." Kara smiled faintly, her heart swelling with gratitude. "You're braver than you give yourself credit for. And you're stronger than you think," Daniel replied. "We'll get through this. Together." As they watched the stars, Kara felt a flicker of hope. She didn't know what awaited her on Noria, but she knew one thing: with Daniel by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. 4-0. The return to Noria. The journey to Noria was tense and silent. Kara and Daniel sat side by side in the crystalline Norian craft, their surroundings a stark contrast to the simple life they had built on Earth. The walls shimmered with a soft, ever-changing light, and the hum of the ship's energy fields was almost hypnotic. Yet, neither of them felt comforted. Kara's heart raced with a mix of anticipation and dread. She had not set foot on her homeworld since her exile, and though she had once longed to return, the circumstances now felt impossibly daunting. Her defiance of the council's decree and her insistence on bringing Daniel along were bold gambles, and she knew the council would not take them lightly. Daniel, meanwhile, remained stoic, though his mind churned with uncertainty. He had agreed to stand by Kara, but the idea of confronting an alien council on a foreign world was overwhelming. Still, he reminded himself of one thing: he trusted Kara, and that trust was enough to anchor him. The ship touched down on Noria with a soft, melodic hum. Kara inhaled sharply as the ramp lowered, revealing the breathtaking landscape of her homeworld. The crystalline towers of the capital city shimmered like frozen sunlight, rising above lush, floating gardens that defied gravity. The air was cool and crisp, filled with the faint scent of mineral springs. It was beautiful, achingly so, but it no longer felt like home. Daniel stepped onto the smooth surface of the landing pad, his gaze sweeping over the surreal architecture. "It's incredible," he murmured. Kara nodded, her voice tight. "It is, and yet, it is a cage." Their Norian escorts led them through the city in silence, drawing stares from passers-by. The sight of a human walking beside a Norian woman, both with their heads held high, was an oddity that drew murmurs and disapproving glances. Kara ignored them, her focus on the path ahead. The council's chamber was exactly as she remembered it, a vast, echoing hall of gleaming crystal, bathed in an ethereal light that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The elders sat in a semicircle, their towering forms radiating authority. At the center was the head elder, his piercing gaze fixed on Kara. "Kara of House Talon," he intoned, his voice resonating through the chamber. "You return to us not as a penitent but as a defiant. Explain yourself." Kara stepped forward, her voice clear and unwavering. "Elders, I return to share what I have learned. You sent me to Earth as punishment, believing it would humble me. Instead, it opened my eyes. I found strength, resilience, and kindness among humans. Qualities our society has dismissed as primitive. I stand before you now not as an exile but as a bridge between two worlds." The murmurs among the elders grew louder. The head elder raised a hand to silence them, his expression unreadable. "You bring a human into our sacred halls," he said, his tone sharp. "What purpose does this serve?" Kara gestured to Daniel. "This is Daniel Hayes. He represents the humanity you have scorned. He is a man of courage, compassion, and ingenuity. He has shown me that strength lies not in isolation but in connection. If we are to truly lead the galaxy, we must embrace these truths." Daniel stepped forward, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. "I'm not here to challenge your ways or disrespect your traditions. I'm here because Kara believed I could help you understand what humans are capable of. We may not have your technology or your wisdom, but we have something just as valuable, the ability to adapt, to learn, and to grow." The room fell silent as the elders considered his words. The head elder's gaze shifted between Kara and Daniel, his expression thoughtful. "You speak boldly, human. But words alone cannot change centuries of tradition. What proof do you offer of your claims?" Kara stepped forward again, her voice filled with conviction. "The proof is in our actions. Daniel and I have worked together to overcome challenges, combining the strengths of our two peoples. I propose that we demonstrate this through collaboration, not isolation." The elders exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of skepticism and intrigue. Finally, the head elder spoke. "Very well. We will consider your proposal. But understand this, Kara of House Talon, your path is fraught with danger. Should you fail, the consequences will be severe." Kara bowed her head, her determination unwavering. "I understand, Elder. And I accept." After the hearing, Kara and Daniel were escorted to a private chamber within the council's compound. The room was luxurious, with walls of shimmering crystal and a view of the floating gardens below. Yet, neither of them felt at ease. "That could have gone worse," Daniel said, breaking the silence. Kara sighed, her shoulders slumping. "It is only the beginning. The council is stubborn, and their trust is hard-earned. But we must succeed." Daniel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We will. You've already shown them something they didn't expect. That's a start." Kara looked at him, her gratitude evident. "Thank you, Daniel. For standing by me, even when the odds seem impossible." He smiled. "You'd do the same for me." As they gazed out at the city, a sense of purpose settled over them. They had taken the first step in an uphill battle, but they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead together.